1,000 days of war, and Ukraine's parliament is still standing. Still populated by elected Ukrainian MPs. So, a moment to reflect on that, and on the people who died to make sure it's still the case. Then, it was back to business. In the early hours, American ATACAM's in operation. This video set to show the launch. Ukraine fired the long-range ballistic missiles into Russia after permission was finally granted by President Biden yesterday. Russia's defense ministry said the strike targeted the Bryansk region bordering Ukraine to the north. It said 5 missiles were shot down and 1 damaged, with its fragments causing a fire at a military facility. Looking at this explosion, though, it must have been a very big fragment. The Russian foreign minister at the G20 meeting in Brazil described it as an escalatory gear shift.
If long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory, it will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
So what does that mean? The reason it took Joe Biden so long to give permission to use the system in this way was fear that Vladimir Putin would retaliate with a tactical nuclear weapon, for example. That saber rattling would become button pressing. Biden is bowing out, having concluded that after 2 years of rhetoric, Moscow is, for now, bluffing. Remember, once upon a time, the US agonized over, but eventually sent, Abrams tanks, Patriot missile systems, HIMARS, F-16s, now ATACAMs, and already boundaries being pushed, perhaps, around how they're used. Yesterday, it was reported that the Americans would only allow the system's use to target the Kursk region inside Russia, part of which is under Ukrainian control. This morning's strike, though, was here in Karachev, in the Bryansk area next door. In Kyiv this evening, 1,000 candles for 1,000 days. On one of those days, Yulia had to leave now occupied Mariupol.
My life is turned upside down. There is no life for me. I only want victory and to return home.
What really matters now is what will the next American administration do? Will talk of rolling back military aid to Ukraine materialize? It's 62 days until Donald Trump becomes president.
Well, thousands of miles away at the G20 summit in Brazil, Sir Keir Starmer said Ukraine must be put in the strongest possible position to win. But many leaders with him at the summit are far less supportive of Ukraine. And when Donald Trump is president again in 2 months' time, international backing could be weaker. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Rio now. Gary.
Well, as you suggest, Donald Trump is on everyone's mind here, the implications of his presidency and the implications of what's going on in Ukraine, but not really part of the formal proceedings. And that's partly because of the nature of this organization, the people around the table. Brazil, the host, didn't want to be talking about Ukraine here and made sure they weren't. They don't really want to choose between East and West. You've got people like Sergei Lavrov here, who you just heard in Porok's report, and you've also got people like President Erdogan. In his close of summit press conference, he said that NATO, of which he is a member, really should sit and take notice of what President Putin is warning about nuclear retaliation for use of long-range missiles. He sounded pretty pro-Trumpy. The G20 is spawned of the very pro-Western G7, but it didn't feel like that at all here this week. And there's one particular vignette you come away with, watching the movements of President Xi this week. He's been having, not always a very sociable man, meetings with just about everybody in the room, leaders, representatives of the countries. It's almost as if the guy here from the Vatican is the only person he hasn't actually sat down and talked to. And he's trying to make contacts, get influence, get his message across for that post-Trump world which this summit ushers in. The G20 family photo, take two. Yesterday's snap was 3 leaders short, including President Biden. Today, leaders were reconvened. Diplomats have complained about the efficiency of the G20 hosts. President Lula looked taken aback when officials told him this one was a few leaders short too, including Keir Starmer. They bunched up on the front row to hide the gap. President Lula wanted poverty and climate change centre stage at Brazil's G20, not Ukraine. President Zelensky was told he couldn't address the gathering of world leaders in Rio, but Washington's decision to authorise the use of long-range ATACAM missiles on targets within Russia upstaged the Brazilians' agenda. Western diplomats say they hope President Xi might intervene with Russia to get President Putin to tone down the talk of nuclear weapons use. But diplomats say Xi's many separate meetings with leaders here have been focused on making connections with other countries. Now the world knows that the next occupant of the White House will be Donald Trump. Just before the G20 ended, I spoke to Keir Starmer and I started by asking him about the future for Ukraine now that Donald Trump had been re-elected. There is a very strong sense at the moment, more than a strong sense, a reality that the US appetite for funding Ukraine's war has pretty much gone. It's over. It's dried up. The EU's appetite for stepping in and utterly filling that void, well, that doesn't exist. Isn't the truth we're entering a new phase, and maybe people should start being realistic about that?
I don't think that's quite right. If you look at the money that's going in, the capability and the training that is being ramped up. But I'm absolutely clear that here at the G20, I am saying that we should double down on our support for Ukraine and make sure that Ukraine has what it needs for as long as it needs, because this is day 1,000, as you say.
Donald Trump says he's not.
1,000 days of Russian aggression.
Donald Trump says he's not going to do that.
1,000 days of sacrifice by Ukraine.
You don't think Donald Trump's bluffing, do you?
Well, my position is very, very clear. This isn't just about sovereignty in Ukraine. It's about all of us. There's a huge impact on the United Kingdom. This is day 1,000 of aggression.
Yes, but we can't do any of that without money. And if Europe's not going to pay and America's not going to pay, we're in a new dispensation, aren't we?
There is a huge cost if Russia wins through aggression in this war.
But we might be there.
A huge cost that we will all be paying. And that's why I've said that we cannot allow Putin to win this war, which is why I am doubling down with colleagues here at the G20 and saying we must do what's necessary.
President Zelensky wasn't even allowed to come here. The hosts didn't allow him a ticket.
I think had 6 meetings with President Zelensky
in
the 4 months that I've been in office. So we're frequently talking to President Zelensky, as are other world leaders, many of whom are here.
Yeah, let me ask you something else, because you're very clear you don't want to talk about operational matters to do with the use of long-range missiles and whether they are now authorised. I want to ask you a slightly different question. Are you confident you know because Russia has been talking about how conventional weapons could be responded to with nuclear weapons. Are you sure you know what their threshold is, what the trigger point is for that kind of reaction?
Well, I will just say again, I'm not going to comment on operational matters. And the reason for that, as anybody who knows about conflict will readily understand, Putin is the winner if we do so, and it undermines the Ukrainian effort. But I do think that it's important that we see the facts as they are. This is day 1,000. Russia is the aggressor,
absolutely,
a breach of the UN
I'll ask you a specific question, though, about,
and people we must stand firm.
You'll appreciate people will be very worried about this, the nuclear word from Russia. Do you know what the threshold is?
Well, we must deal with the facts as they are and ensure that we are clear about who is the aggressor here. And the single simplest way to end this conflict is for Russia to walk away from its aggression. And we need to be really clear.
With Donald Trump in the White House, that's not really very likely.
There's no equivalence here between Russia and Ukraine. Russia has invaded sovereign territory in Europe, in Europe.
Yeah.
And now we're on day 1,000 of that conflict. It is impacting not just Ukraine, but the rest of the world, including the United Kingdom. And if we allow Putin to win this war, we will all pay a very high price.
Can I ask you more broadly about the budget? You talked about the black hole that you had to fix. And people look at the numbers, your spending numbers, and they're slightly baffled. Because you have sorted out spending in the terms you described wanting to sort it out, but for the next 2 years. Spending goes up by just over 3% for the next 2 years, and then we're way back crashing down to 1.3%, and it's left a lot of people baffled about what's going on here. In fact, someone who you've invoked a lot over the years, IFS boss Paul Johnson, the guru of these matters, actually called that budget a sticking plaster. That hurts, doesn't it?
Well, what we did in the budget was fix the fundamentals. We filled a black hole, so there's a gap in our economy that the last government left, £22 billion. I could have done what the last government did, which was to pretend it wasn't there, carry on with the fiction. I wasn't prepared to do that, so we've dealt with that. But we've also put record investment, and where have we put it? Into our NHS, into our schools, so every child can go as far as their talent will take them,
That's the
and into housing. No, these are long-term. These are long-term. The investments
I could show you the graph.
Clearly,
you've seen the graph.
Well, you'll understand that the investment
spending goes right up, and then it comes right down.
The investment is capital investment, huge amount of investment. There've been, a number of comments about the budget, but not many people are saying you haven't invested heavily in the future of the country.
He acknowledges that, and lots of other people do as well. It's this baffling spending movement, and it makes people think that it's almost inevitable, even though she denied it the other day, that Rachel Reeves will be back for more. This isn't it on major tax takes, is it?
I think if you were to do a poll of those watching this and say, do they think the investment should go into our NHS, into our schools and into our houses, they would agree with that.
But I'm asking, is that it? Are you coming back for more?
No, look, we've set out in the budget the terms of the budget. I'm not going to now write budgets for the future, but that was intended to be the budget that fixed the foundations. That was the purpose of it.
And just finally, you've been very clear on assisted dying. You do not want to influence that vote.
Yes.
We'll know the way you vote on the day you vote. I want to ask, some people think you are influencing it by not promising government time. And you heard in Prime Minister's Questions last week, one MP, but I think he speaks for many others, who'd feel more encouraged to vote for this if they thought there was proper time to debate it. And you could do that. You could give government-protected time to do it. And because you haven't done that, they're suspicious that deep down you've got fingers crossed behind your back, and this cause that you've always supported, you actually don't want to triumph next Friday.
I do think there's sufficient time, and I think there's a very healthy debate going on about assisted suicide and assisted dying. That's going on every day, and many politicians and many others are in that debate. I know that feelings are very strongly held on both sides, and this is not party political. That's why it's important for the government to be neutral, and it's important that MPs don't feel pressurised in relation to their vote, that it is a genuinely free vote.
No fingers crossed behind your back.
No, it's a genuinely free vote.
Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you.